So we're here again, and I've got a coffee made by somebody else because mine evidently is terrible. So Cortina. I thought we'd do a little video just about the Cortina. Now I'm trying to get the timescales right here. The episode 8 uncut video we shot last Thursday, and then we were just all manic, all hands on deck, trying to get this to an event, which I didn't disclose what it was at the time, but on the Sunday, so 2 days ago, we took this to the Targa Club event at Prescott Hill Climb, which was basically a private invite event with a lot of very big name manufacturers there. So we felt, I mean, we thought it was an awesome idea to take the Cortina. Was very nervous in the run-up to it, in the fact that we were taking a Ford Cortina to an event which was populated by the likes of McLaren, Aston Martin. There was a Ferrari 250 short wheelbase by GTO Engineering there. There was a lot of very nice cars. But actually, when we were there, we were really proud of it, and I think it definitely held its own. We took another couple of cars as well. Blue Alpha, we built probably 3 years ago with a Millington Diamond engine in it. A lot of custom touches on that car as well, and we also took the Jag that's sitting back there. If you watch Harry's Garage, Harry Metcalf's YouTube channel, you will probably have seen all 3 cars, because he did a little walk round of the event, a little walk around each 3 of the cars, and there's a little bit of footage of the Alpha being driven up the hill later on as well, which was cool. So yeah, we made it, we got it there. There were still some jobs left to do on it, so although it was running and I did drive it onto the transporter and off her again, it was completely untested, so we didn't actually sort of drive it up the hill or anything like that. So now we've got it back here again, we're just running through all of the remaining bits we needed to do on it. I know that from driving it, the clutch, we needed to adjust the clutch slightly because it was very high on the pedal travel. The brakes needed bleeding again. We obviously hadn't done that correctly the first time because the pedal was pretty spongy. So we're just going through the last little bits to basically get it ready for me to be able to road test it. And then in a couple of weeks' time, should be ready to hand over to the customer. So I thought I'd show you a few details. There was actually an episode we did called Caffeine and Cortina, which we posted, I think, in March. It was literally like the week we locked down because of coronavirus. And we'd just about finished the metalwork. And funnily enough, I watched the video last night, and I basically said, hopefully we should be able to get it ready for late August, early September. So I'm pretty chuffed that we have, given that we were actually closed basically for six weeks out of that, and down to half the team for another 6 weeks. So yeah, quite the transformation. We actually finished painting the shell and we're ready to start rebuilding the car 7 weeks ago, I think it was. So we've taken it from a painted shell to a finished car in 7 weeks, which is for us extremely fast, and probably testament to the fact that we did so much dry build when it was a bare metal shell. So for those who haven't already gathered this, it's got a Cosworth built 2.3 Duratec, so it's got the Cosworth roller barrel throttle bodies on it. That's making about 250 horsepower, running MBE engine management. We've had Simpson Race exhausts build an exhaust manifold and system for it, which is it's a twin box system, but we got them to put a very small silencer in front of the axle, which is actually removable. It's V-banded front and rear on the system, and then they made us a straight pipe as well with matching V-bands, so you can basically take that box out and put a straight pipe in if you want it to be noisier, or usually for track use where there's noise restrictions, you might want to put that silencer back in, and it's got the silencer on at the moment. It's a dry sumped engine, so we've got a dry sump tank here. This is the breather tank. We bought essentially an off-the-shelf dry sump tank, although we rotated some of the fittings on it, and then we've done brackets on it to hold the breather tank, which sits on the side there. What else have we got? At the back there, you see the little reservoir tops here. Now they're some billet parts we had made, so that there's a top plate, and then the main part of the reservoir is a matching billet piece which sits underneath. And we machined an O-ring groove into that, so the top actually clamps down onto an O-ring onto the bottom, and then there's a step machined into the side of the lid, or it might be into the base, I can't remember which basically allows for the material of the inner wing, so it basically clamps up with the inner wing sandwiched between, and a step that allows that to happen, and the O-ring still to get crushed up, so the top seals to the base. That's the brake fluid and clutch reservoir. There's also a float level switch underneath the cap in there, into a machine fitting in the bottom of the reservoir, which just has a little float on it, which switches a brake light warning on the dash, which we've just put a little LED between the rev counter and the tacho. That one is basically exactly the same reservoir on this side, except it's got a union in the bottom, which then fills a fabricated tank, which sits under the inner wing behind the wheel here, which will have a shield on the front of it eventually to stop stone chips. I think we showed that being made in a previous uncut video. So it looks symmetrical in here, it looks very minimal because there's not a big tank, but this screen wash actually fills a very large tank. I don't know the exact capacity, but I'd guess it's about probably 2.5 litres, maybe even slightly more down there. Strut brace has been removed at the minute. If you watch the first Caffeine and Cortina, you'll probably see the discussion about metalwork, and this sort of extra shape on the inner wing here is not standard. We're actually running completely Escort front suspension on this, and to maintain the Escort geometry, we've extended the inner wings in so that we could run the Escort front struts at the correct camber that they normally run. The cross member is basically a modified Escort cross member, so it's running a rack and pinion steering rather than the steering box they originally had. It's then got Escort adjustable lower track control arms, Bilstein Escort struts, and then because it's all Escort stuff, we could use a typical off-the-shelf brake conversion. So actually on this, we've kept it pretty straightforward. Because it's a light car, we're running the 13-inch steels. We've just gone with the good old Capri vented disc and M16 caliper. Could upgrade potentially to Willwood. Willwood do an alloy caliper that fits in that same kind of envelope, which we might upgrade to, but we wanted to just try it on these to start with, because to be honest, with this car being 90% road use, it is the intention. It's going to be his daily commute car. Didn't think it was worth getting too carried away with the brakes. So that's that. Most of the rest of the front standard, the grille's standard. Headlights are standard. We're just working on some towing points at the minute. It's not going to run bumpers at all. And we're just making some irons that come forward behind here and have a threaded boss on them, so you can screw a towing eye in. We'll have one each side, and then we're going to do similar on the back. That kind of minimal no bumper look was all part of the look we were aiming for. When we were kind of planning the look of this car, we had this kind of 60s NASCAR look at the back of our mind. So, you know, sitting really low on steel wheels, and that's why we've done them black, just so they look quite purposeful. No caps. They look like they have the facility for caps, but they're removed again to kind of give it that purposeful kind of semi-race car look. And then the long studs were an intentional choice, which the owner actually specifically said, I want long studs that stick through the nuts so they stick out the other side, just for cosmetic reasons. And then gold anodized nuts, which obviously you can't see at the minute, but if you saw the pictures of the car done in the last episode of the uncut episode, I think they were on it then. I mean, if you watch the first Caffeine and Cortina, you'll see the amount of sort of rust repair that went into the shell. I'm not going to go into that too much now, but you look at this now and you might think it was a mint shell, and it definitely wasn't. It was a fairly solid one, but we have done a huge amount of metalwork on it. I mean, structurally underneath it was pretty good. The chassis rails are okay, but certainly all of the front end panels have been off and repaired. The wings have been off and repaired and refitted. The door skins we basically made a lower skin for them from, I think, just above or just below that swage line down. We made a skin. We took the whole skin off, made a lower part, TIG welded that along to make a complete skin. And we did that actually because we wanted to retain this upper section was good, and we wanted to maintain that as an original Ford part, because the pattern panels you can get, the crispness of these lines and that return edge that goes back down that the seal attaches to is pretty bad. So we were keen to kind of keep the Ford parts there. The glass is all the original glass, but all new seals. The handles are as they were actually. They were in good condition, so we've left those as they were. Inside, we kind of were aiming for this, I think Cafe Racer inspired look is probably the best way to describe it. And there was a little bit of that with the colour choice as well, which is an Alfa Romeo colour called Juniper Grey. Again, that was the result of numerous spray outs and discussions with the customer, and eventually we basically put a package together of what we thought were the best colour choices. So we did a spray out of the exterior colour with a couple of other options. We did some swatches of the leather, the Alcantara we used on the dash, which is like a charcoal, it's not black, it's slightly lighter. The carpets, the vinyl that we've used to edge the carpets, and we put all that together in a sample pack and basically sent it to the owner with an explanation of our thoughts on why that would work. And there was some umming and ahhing there, and eventually I called him for probably the 5th or 6th time, and he's saying, you know, have you made any decisions? And he said, I'm still unsure, but I trust your judgment, let's just go for it. And I think yeah, he saw the car for the first time on Sunday and he was pretty blown away, so I think we made a good choice. So the door panels, we saw them being made in a previous episode, they're all newly made in plastic, our own kind of design on the pattern, which references some of the original Cortina patterning, but isn't the same as any Cortina pattern. The gear stick, you can see there's basically a raised tower in the tunnel there, which is to house the shifter tower on the MX-5 gearbox. So it's running a Mazda MX-5 5-speed box on this. And then on the top of that, we've machined a little billet bezel, which has been anodised black. Little countersunk bolts, which we polished the heads on. Dean, the upholsterer, then made a gaiter for that. We painted the stick black, which is a custom-made stick that we made cranked back to kind of get the position to the steering wheel nice. The gear knob itself we machined, and then we've done the leather band on there, and then the finishing touch was the little disc on the top, which was laser cut to that circle and then laser engraved with the GT logo. Handbrake again, we did a billet bezel for that, and machined the grip, which I think I mentioned last time. The dash top is the original but refoamed and then upholstered in Alcantara. Obviously the dash fascia, and they call these the airflow ones. And that dash is just so gorgeous. There wasn't really any need to change anything massively on that. So it's all original but repainted. The smaller auxiliary gauges, we've just kept those standard and used the matching senders. The main instrument panel, the tacho, we've basically got a new stepper motor tacho and transplanted all of the face, the needle, the glass and the bezel from the original to make that basically modern innards but looking like a standard one. And then the speedo is standard. That's using a nifty little device from Speed Hut in the States called a speed box, which is basically a stepper motor drive that you can attach a speedo cable to. So there's a stepper motor that sits up behind the dash, gets its pulsed speed sensor from either a wheel speed sensor or a GPS signal, and then basically spins the cable using a motor. So we've got the original speedo but being driven by a GPS signal. The seats, as they are at the minute, are just bare carbon. Now we showed it off like this on Sunday. They are going to be upholstered, although they look quite cool like that anyway. The owner wanted them to be low back buckets, but it did want 4-point harnesses on it because he's planning on occasional track use. And happy to take the risk with no head support, amazingly. And it does look very cool. So we're going to be upholstering those in leather to match the rest, just in a nice classic look. When we did the metalwork, we put the cross rails in to mount the seats. We've also done a lot of work on the chassis stiffening. So when you're looking back behind the seat there's like a punched and flared box section, and that forms part of 2 sections we put each side, which basically strengthen the whole shell. So on these, normally the chassis leg comes under the floor and actually ends roughly where the middle of the seat is, and then there's a section all the way to the back which doesn't have anything structural other than just the sills. So what we've done there is we've added a section on the inside there and then a section on the underside, I can't remember if it's in front of that or behind that, which when sort of together they basically form a continuous chassis leg front to back. And then the entire shell was seam brazed, so TIG brazed on every flange, every spot welded seam was stitch brazed to stiffen the shell. And we tend to braze rather than weld using traditional welding rods, just because it's slightly more malleable, so you don't risk getting hairline cracks coming out from the end of those welds. So the shell's a hell of a lot stiffer than a normal Cortina shell, which was a particular weak point of these. We've done a really discreet sort of main roll hoop here, A for roll protection and B to stiffen the shell further. It's actually tight enough in the shape that we made it that we could weld it directly to the pillar. We literally stitch welded it on. We didn't even need to make gusset plates for it. It literally touches all the way down the pillar. And then we've done a bolt-in diagonal to brace that back to sort of corner of the inner arch where that meets the bulkhead. Bulkhead panel again is a welded piece that we put in again to stiffen the shell. And then we also did what they did on the Works Lotus race cars, which is a diagonal from the back here on the boot floor up to a structural point under here, and then there's another one that comes down back here. And it's basically because they had a lot of problems with the back of these cars. When you change them from leaf sprung to coilovers, which are up into the turrets, the spring load is put into a totally different place. It's not spread right back here. So they actually had problems with the whole back of the shell basically sagging down under hard use and kinking the quarter panels. So we've put those tubes in the same as the Works cars to combat that. Also in that sort of in line with the Works Lotus setup, we've done an English axle in it that has been strengthened and is mounted in a different way. So originally, obviously, these are leaf sprung. We've got a strengthening tube that runs along the axle, which stiffens the axle, but also gives us another mounting point underneath. And then it's basically got an A bracket set up, which gives you your lateral location of the axle. And then it runs coilovers up into basically a strengthened version of the original turret. Nitron built the coilovers for us. It's running 140-pound springs all round, which to a lot of people sounds insanely soft, but actually road-going Escorts and Cortinas, with the way the leverage ratio works on the springs, that's actually quite a nice rate for a road car. It's not as soft as you would think. We've obviously done disc brake conversion on the axle, so that's Sierra calipers. They're little baby Fiesta discs off the front of, I guess, a Mark II Fiesta. And then Sierra handbrake cables, and then we've done a bracket which just bolts up in the middle of the tunnel, which holds those handbrake cable outers. And then they're actually almost exactly the right length to then just do a real simple link cable to the original handbrake lever. Which, on the subject of the handbrake lever, there were two different handbrake layouts on these. There's the stick that you pull from the dash and the normal floor mount one. Now this had the dash stick pull out one, but they have the mount in the floor still for the original one. So we've actually gone with the floor mount lever, and then we've repurposed the stick on the dash. So it's actually, you pull it out and it clicks a micro switch, which engages a line lock, which is basically it's a solenoid valve in the front brake lines, so that you can hold the brake on, switch the valve to hold brake pressure on the front and release it from the back, basically for doing burnouts, which is obviously originally from drag racing circles. In this case, it's just that the owner's a bit of a hooligan and he wants to do burnouts. But it's a cool toy anyway to have. So that's axle. We've not really shown in the boot on this before. It's just super clean, minimal. We're just making a boot carpet to go in here. As I say, it's going to be his daily car, so doesn't want to scratch the paintwork in the boot when he's putting bags in there. We did a battery mount in the front of the floor there, as far forward as we can, just to keep the weight of the battery sort of over the axle. The fuel tank was from Retro Ford, actually. That's just a conversion that they do. It's a standard tank that's had a swirl pot welded into it, and has the feed and the return in AN6 threaded fittings. I've got a Bosch fuel pump and filter mounted up under the floor on that side. And one thing that's perhaps the most obvious when you sort of look at the car, for the first time, you look in the engine bay, you look in the boot, you think, well, where are all the wires? And that's really just as a result of the planning we did when it was at the bare metal stage. So we put, threaded studs spot welded in under the inner wings, behind the front panel, wherever we wanted to route the wiring, so that we could then have attachment points for wiring where we wanted it. And then, as we probably saw previously, we had Bremax come and measure up our proposed routing for the loom and then build the loom, which is then operating the electrics via a PDU. So that's a power distribution unit, or some people call them PDM, power distribution module. And that's a programmable device, like an ECU, that controls all the electrical systems on the car. And we can basically program any of the electrical switches to control any of the electrical devices and the way they control them. So for instance, just to explain a couple of instances where that's been handy, on this car originally there is no hazard warning switch. So this is an example. The stalk on the column, when you push it, that's the horn. we've programmed it so if the ignition's off and you push that for 1 second, it turns the hazard lights on. You push it for a second again, it turns them off again. But when the ignition's on, it's the horn. Likewise, we're building security into the car in so much as before you turn the key and start it, you have to do a certain sequence of button presses of controls that otherwise do normal functions, but only the owner and us will know what that sequence is. So it's basically an immobilization system. You can't just pull the wires off the ignition switch and jam them together as you would normally if you were trying to hotwire a car. Normally, it's a normal thing, hotwiring a car. So yeah, that's basically it. It's just a kind of cool, understated, but we like to think nicely executed Cortina. As I say, 2 weeks. It's going to be hopefully ready to hand over to the owner, and his plan is to use it as much as he possibly can. He also owns the Millington Engine Alpha. I don't know if I said that already. Now that's kind of a lot more hardcore. He does use that on the road. Contrary to what Harry said in his Harry's Garage videos, they are both road legal cars. That one's a lot more track focused though. So although he does take it to car meets, you wouldn't want to do sort of long journeys and just general commuting service in it. Whereas this one's much more just for relaxed trips out, going to work and back. Still hold its own on the track, still going to be a very fast and fun car, but when you want to take it easy, it's not vibrating, intense. You can take it easy, and it's a relaxing drive. That's always been the plan for this car. So over the next couple of weeks, I'll be test driving it, and hopefully I might get a bit of footage of that as well. So yeah, that's it. That's the Cortina. That's where we're at, and in a couple of weeks' time, hopefully done, out of the door.